I think the industry stats is that about between 30 to 40% of budget is really wasted on unused or underutilized resources. And that's why cloud cost optimization is becoming top IT priority.
What are some of the biggest kind of challenges or misconceptions that are making those migrations very, very challenging and very long processes?
The biggest misconception is that once you migrate it, you're done. But you're not done. This evolution is really moving from traditional banking, like very siloed system, to much more interconnected componentry that can be put together to deliver business capabilities to users.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of Data Innovators. Today I'm speaking with Alla Piltser, former managing director and head of digital solutions and automation services at Bank of America. Alla, thanks so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Amazing. So let's dive right in. You come from a 30-year career at financial services, all the way from being an IT consultant to leading big infrastructure teams. Tell us a little bit about your journey all the way from JP Morgan to Bank of America.
Yeah, so I started my career at IBM, where I learned assembly and internals of the operating systems, forever grateful. And a few years into my career, I founded a consulting firm, which provided services to leading financial institutions. And the reason was really twofold. Number one, I was excited to work in different environments and different challenges. And number two, I had two small children. So having my evenings with them was really my priority. And when the kids got older, I did take a full-time position to build a new team, distributed capacity and performance management, with a major financial firm. And that's how my full-time journey started.
30-year career in financial services. Let's talk a little bit about what's coming in 2026. What are some of the major priorities for data platform teams in financial services, big banks going into next year?
So it's a great question. So certainly focus of the data platform team switched. Data platform teams are prioritizing initiatives that align with digital transformation, which really business needs, regulatory compliance, and customer-centric innovation as they move into 2026. And the priorities really reflect the need to balance operational efficiency, security, competitive pressures from fintech, and evolving customer expectations. So I would say there are a few key focus areas that I see consistently across different banks, financial institutions. One is really enhanced data analytics and AI-driven insights. Banks are building data backbone to support and scale their AI, which means making sure data is clean, accessible, and automated. Like, for example, at the Bank of America, AI-powered virtual assistant Erica, it was trained on quality data, and banks spend years aggregating and cleaning it. Also, banks are using predictive analytics to make sure that they enhance some key capabilities like fraud detection, and that drives customer trust and satisfaction. So there is a much more close alignment to business where it's purely, technology function. The second one is data governance and compliance. There is increased pressure from regulators. There are regulatory changes, like, for example, CFPB's final rule on the Dodd-Frank Act that mandates the data to be shared with third parties, consumers, and it drives adoption of open banking, which means data platforms need to support very secure standardized data sharing, usually through API, to enable this composable banking. And banks currently and data platform teams are looking at the governance and compliance. It's not just a chore anymore. It's really a way to unlock trust, to unlock new value. And you can see this like for Citigroup, data transformation, it's top strategic priority for 2025 and already for 2026. in order to properly unlock data value, you need to modernize not just infrastructure, uh, the computer infrastructure, but also data architecture. Um, and it's part of really moving toward cloud modernization, scalability strategy, and cloud adoption is absolutely critical to scale data platforms. So banks are moving away from this traditional data warehousing to more flexible, scalable current architecture that's provided by cloud providers. And the move to these data platforms is complex. It's very complex. Like Bank of America, I know, is investing into infrastructure modernization and pipelines. So it's not just to scale, but it's also to enable reuse on this foundational data for multiple projects. So you can deliver new, let's say, AI capabilities quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And which brings us to the problem it poses. So on one hand, you need to move to the cloud to unlock your value and fully unlock your data. However, cost management and operational efficiency becoming a problem, right? Because there is rising cost, not that just from tech investment and compensation and inflation, but there is also rising cost of this infrastructure that in a lot of cases is not really being fully utilized. And on one hand, banks are conducting activity-based costing or ABC, right? Try to understand where inefficiencies are. There is a drive to automate as much as possible with the repetitive tasks, but infrastructure resources, compute and storage are in the cloud, especially, is a huge component because it's not just a chargeback model anymore. It's truly like real money out the door. And just to demonstrate, to support this point, I know in one of the financial organization I'm working with, there are 10 to 15 people team that just doing data quality daily, tracking down problems, remediating them. And this is a very lengthy process. And it doesn't really scale for current needs. So data is enabler of business at this point, and banks are trying to monetize their data. It's not just for reporting. It's strategic asset for creating revenue, improving customer experience through hyper personalization, for 360, unifying data from different sources. And it's really becoming much more real time data driven decision systems enablement versus just a, stale historic data warehousing.
Great, Alla. So you just touched on multiple topics from data accessibility, AI, all the way down to cost optimization, migrations, data governance, compliance. Amazing. Let's start to unpack that. You mentioned, we've seen cost optimization, a lot of pressure around it, platform cost increasing, especially in the cloud. Talk to us a little bit about how critical it is for data platform this year, especially coming again toward 2026.
So I think cost optimization is becoming highly critical for data platforms in 25, 26. And it's driven by explosive growth in cloud spending, persistent waste, overruns, integration of AI technologies that really amplify data management costs. And this unchecked expenses can really erode profitability. So it goes back to impact to business for, impact to bottom line. And for data platforms, optimizing this cost is absolutely essential, not only from the cost perspective, but also scalability, to be able to handle protected data volumes without totally ballooning and blowing up budgets. I think the industry stats is that about between 30 to 40% of budget is really wasted on unused or underutilized resources. And that's why cloud cost optimization is becoming top IT priority. They're building dedicated FinOps team. But a lot of the times these teams don't really have needed visibility. And all they do is really showbacks. versus actively managing these costs. So it is cost, but there is also cost, not just financial, but cost in performance, because these resources do deteriorate performance. So you need to be optimized, not just for cost, but for the response time or service time. And I think these two kind of legs of that stool are absolutely critical to make sure that data team provide the best service to the business.
So I hear you saying FinOps teams today are much more reactive than actually proactive, essentially playing back or breaking down the bill data versus actually managing proactively on how to optimize. What are some of the challenges? Like why can't they do the proactive optimizations, monitoring to the extent that we want it to be?
Yeah, I think there are a few of challenges. So number one, just trying to identify inefficiencies very deep inside of the kind of the platform, from the infrastructure side, but also from the application perspective. So it's really this combined view. And so you need expertise. You need expertise on both sides, and you need to correlate and understand the full stack, and also optimizing at scale, which is really just as ongoing operational management of this platform. So it's not a one-time deal. It's this ongoing management and optimization based on the characteristics of how platform performs, how platform is being used. That's what creates this challenge. So you truly need SMEs or, subject matter experts that understand this. And especially when we are talking now hybrid environment, you have on-prem infrastructure, you have cloud infrastructure. You need to understand how it ties back to actual end-to-end service. It is a very complex task to undertake. So I think probably without using technology, I would say it's not something that can be done well at scale in a repetitive manner. So probably technology is our friend there to be able to achieve it.
No, I think those are three great points. One, how can it be seamlessly automated and part of the, an inherent part of the actual infrastructure? Number two, there's no silver bullet or like a magic that, it's a one-time effort and now you're done for the next 5 years. It's an ongoing process. And I think, the way that we think about it from a proactive way and the ability to get ahead of ourselves, I think those are three very, very important points. And, it all comes back. You mentioned how all of this is exacerbated in the cloud environment versus a traditional on-prem environment. And I think one of the priorities you touched on earlier were migrations. This big shift from on-prem to cloud obviously been going on for about 10 or 15 years now on the traditional or application engineering side, and now on the data platform side. What are some of the biggest kind of challenges or misconceptions that especially big banks, financial services teams are facing that are making those migrations very, very challenging and very long processes?
Yeah, it is definitely a huge challenge, especially for the mature enterprise, because they do have a lot of legacy application infrastructure. There is a lot of technical debt. So just to understand all their integration points, all the dependencies, and frankly, all the data dependencies, not just process dependencies, but data required to do that. So I think to begin with, there is over simplification of what it takes to move this, not just the workload, but data associated with it. Even understanding what data you have, consistent classification of data, etc., and making sure data it's quality data. And there is parity between on-prem and the cloud. I think the biggest misconception is that once you migrate it, you're done. But you're not done, right? It's really going back to ongoing management. Visibility is different between on-prem and the cloud, it's also a shared responsibility model. So you don't have good visibility into all the parts of the stack. You really need to understand not just what you have in terms of data, integration points, and dependencies, but also understand performance and results that are consistent and accurate. And I think that's what put a lot of migrations at risk, because you do need to manage it on an ongoing basis. Performance is a big one because of the resiliency. There are availability zones. There is added latency. There is speed of light, right? We can only process things depending on the distance that fast. So optimizing your queries, optimizing actual data platform is absolutely critical in being able to respond properly with the expected SLA. And I think a lot of the times it puts migration at risks. It actually blocks it. I have seen when actually the strategy and decisions were to move back on-prem. And it's not because cloud platform couldn't handle it. It's because it just was not, number one, properly planned. Number two, there weren't proper automation and tooling around it to sustainably, properly manage the platform.
Yeah, and I think this capability or lack thereof that you just called out, and I think there is always a little bit of a tension between the centralized platform or infra team that want to push the migrations versus the engineering teams that handle the day-to-day and then want to make sure that the reliability is there, both from an output perspective and of course from performance, as you just called out. If you lack the tools or the right infrastructure on the infrastructure to support the migration and overall ensure the reliability and performance, it's always hard to get those teams on board. And this is, I think, a lot of times when some of those delays are, at least what we're seeing, are happening. And a lot of the tension on, we want to make sure that the migration happens within a certain timeline, but then, things start getting delayed because not every team is on board and they're running their day to day. And the last thing that they now want to do is start doing a lot of validations and a lot of retesting on a new platform.
Exactly. And then again, ongoing management, right? And visibility into these platforms are absolutely critical. So again, back to similar point that we had about optimization, cost optimization, it's not a one-time activity. Yeah. So migration potentially is one-time activity. However, management of the platform is ongoing.
Now, one of the other points that you called out when you talked about 2026 priorities was around compliance, data governance, regulatory environment. Obviously, we've seen in the past couple of years some significant stories or circle back of regulators with financial institutions around data quality, compliance issues, some big fines that we've seen coming around. What are some of the must-haves in terms of data governance, quality, compliance that, again, those data platform infrastructure teams need to think about at scale in financial services?
Yeah, so number one, because of this regulatory focus on data governance, a lot of banks, big organization, financial organization have a now office of CDO. And that office really has requirements around data governance. It is mandated. And there is usually a federated approach where there are still individual owners of the data domains. However, it needs to be governed in a consistent manner. So it is not easy task. We need to ensure data quality, data completeness, data observability, to make sure that we are providing consistent results and outputs. And this is not the solution that can be manually managed. This absolutely requires automated approach, and it has to track this quality and usage in an automated way. I would say this is key. And it is something that regulators absolutely are looking for when they're talking to banks. and especially now we are talking about open banking and sharing of data. And it's not just sharing; it will be usage of data. It will enable also
Mm-hmm.
capabilities, new digital products. Again, we are talking about this 360 for customers, which really means this data has to be of very high fidelity. And the only way to do it is during the really pipeline, right? It's not during the use of this data, and then just ongoing management and periodic reviews and governance.
Great. So if I break it down even one layer below to specific capability, it sounds like you mentioned kind of pipeline awareness, maybe lineage, access, usage, how all of those tie together sound like that's the foundation. If you try to do things at the back end or after the fact, you're too late to the game.
You're too late to the game. It truly is. Everything is shifting left, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
meaning you want to do inline as much of your kind of QA or quality as possible. And there has to be also evidence of it. So logging your integration through new protocols, APIs with event management systems, so things can be actioned and remediated. Again, inline is a desired way to process this huge quantity of data.
Couldn't agree more. Shifting gears a little bit, we of course again have to talk about AI, right? So as a platform infra leader, what are some of the core foundational capabilities that we need to have today in order to support the Gen AI use cases, specifically again for financial services potentially, and kind of the ecosystem that you typically work in?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and absolutely data is key. A long time ago, when I was capacity manager and was doing analytical queuing models trying to predict resource consumption, we always said garbage in, garbage out in any modeling. And it's more than true in this kind of Gen AI era. When I was at the Databricks seminar, I've heard someone mention that data is new gold. And I couldn't agree more. So data is absolutely foundational. It fuels our ability to deliver high fidelity Gen AI capabilities. And it's really not just foundational models. It's really ability to use your own proprietary data to contextualize the model, to make sure that it's relevant to the specific task at hand. So it's really this specialization that is being, models being trained on data that is relevant for the task. And this contextualized metadata is king. It's really absolutely critical to properly enable these capabilities. There are fears that data will run out. Obviously, there is synthetic data for some use cases, etc. But at the end, it just highlights how precious data is, and if we don't manage it right, we are not going to be able to deliver proper capabilities grounded in kind of in our data and Gen AI applications, and we will erode trust of our clients, and we are not going to be able to compete.
Yeah, no, great. I think my takeaways from what you just said is quality data is the foundation. You need the right context in order to,
Absolutely.
enable the models to produce the right output.
Absolutely.
So shifting one more gear, we're coming almost to an end. You've been very involved in the innovation ecosystem, been an advisory board for startups like Turbonomics. We'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective on how startup innovation is changing, the infrastructure ecosystem, in big banks, obviously very different scale, and big enterprise that move very, very slowly, and startup that move very, very quickly. How does that work go together?
So I think there is shifted focus for startups. It's not really about competition at this point. It's about partnership. So it's all this convergence of AI, of open banking, kind of cloud native technologies, blockchains. This evolution is really moving from traditional banking, like very siloed system, to much more interconnected, interoperable componentry that can be put together to deliver, business capabilities to users. So I would say startups at this point, they're partners and they're part of the ecosystems. They're not anymore outsiders, and they are fueling this innovation into more traditional enterprise, which carries traditional enterprise carries proper compliance, cybersecurity, risk posture. So this is all extremely valuable. So I would say each side has something to offer, and together it creates extremely compelling, future for banking, distributed finance, and open banking, to have exciting products that are hyper personalized, that create this 360 client view and are driven by technology, AI, for predictive capabilities, for recommendations, something that can be real-time insights. So I would say it's really exciting, and startups are truly partners in this journey.
And are big banks, again, considering the scale, considering the way slower pace, again, from broader perspective, of course, considering a lot of risk aversion, very regulated industry, are they open to those type of partnerships with startups?
So they absolutely are. As a matter of fact, quite a few banks have technology business partnership unit that evaluates innovative new companies, startups, against requirements, against existing gaps. So there are annual summits that are being held. And even when the company is fairly early, if they really have this unique space, there is still conversation and feedback from the banks. So it's really interesting to see how the banks are fitting into product development, into the roadmaps, to make sure that the startups do deliver capabilities to the banks that they can leverage. So it is a cautious approach, absolutely, because again, at the end, banks do need to manage risk. They cannot erode trust of their customers. However, they do understand that without this partner startup ecosystems, they're not going to be able to deliver what customers are looking for. So it's this symbiotic relationship, which is really, really interesting. And I have seen startups even fairly early in their product cycles were able to, deliver capabilities and partner with banks when they had that niche where, current traditional vendors of tooling were not able to do, and banks just kind of had to deal whether with regulatory requirements, or they had something that they had to deliver, and that was the only way to proceed. So I think it's exciting. It's exciting for both, right? We really combining and fusing it into extremely compelling future.
So last question here, again, coming from a 30-year career as a platform infrastructure leader in financial services, for fellow leaders managing multi tens, hundreds of $1 million infrastructures like the one that you've managed before, what's the one advice or most painful mistake you'd caution them against again, hard-learned lessons from a full career?
Yeah, so I would probably go back to what I've mentioned before. It's really failed underestimating uh, challenges and plannings required for the data platform migration. And by the way, the migration doesn't need to be on-prem to cloud, even on-prem to on-prem.
Mm-hmm.
In one of the places, I had a data platform migration from kind of more legacy warehousing to more near real-time pipelines platform. It took over 2 years, which is a very long time. So underestimating it, not having automated solutions to help with migrations, to understand again data quality and performance, on old and new platforms, and understanding challenges in ongoing management. So I would say this is probably the biggest challenge I've seen, and some of the screw ups, frankly, right, where migration had to be aborted in some cases just because there wasn't proper um, expectations what it would
Mm-hmm.
take. And also having again people and skill set. These modern platforms are complex. We do ask developers and data scientists and engineers to do more, and also take part of the functions that used to be traditionally infrastructure. So with infrastructure as code, more responsibility is moving toward people that manage these platforms and use these platforms. And again, skill set is something that is still rarefied. So use of the technology and understanding all the pieces and components that required, that now responsibility of this team, including security, vulnerability management and everything else is now shifting. So this is a very complex area. And if it's not planned properly and not understood properly and not automated, it will be painful.
All right, so you weaved it in the last minute of our conversation, but I think it's a great topic for potentially a new conversation all around how talent and expertise is shifting, and how do we think about it in the new era of modern data platforms, AI, and supporting those platforms that constantly move and constantly migrate and upgrade. So I'm looking forward to potentially have a new conversation just around that. So before we wrap up, if people want to follow you along and the work that you're doing today and the advisory that you're doing today, where should they go?
LinkedIn.
I think that's the common answer.
Yeah, it is.
Amazing. So Alla Piltser on LinkedIn. Alla, thanks so much for being with us today. This has been a really interesting conversation. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.